weather is as great wherever you are as it is where I am. I am no longer in Texas. I am back home in the bunker in the middle of Georgia where it's hot and muggy. But that's okay. It was hot and muggy in Texas as well. You know, so I flew out to Dallas Monday night, was at the Religious Broadcasters Conference, and normally, you know, you just go from Atlanta and shoot straight across to Dallas. Instead, due to weather, we had to go down to the Gulf of Mexico and then come up over New Orleans and head into Texas that way. But it was fascinating to be in Texas. So now for perspective here, in Georgia, by and large, things have gone back to normal. But you still see, for example, at the grocery stores, you still see the plexiglass barriers between you and the cashier of the grocery store. You still tend to see on floors the stickers that say stay 6 feet apart, social distance, all that, even as you see fewer and fewer people wearing masks. In Texas, there was none of that. In fact, on Tuesday, Philip, who was with me, Philip does all the digital stuff for me. Philip and I, he went out there, his uncle was there, so he went instead of Charlie, and we went to a place. It was a cigar store, and next door there was a pub, and in Grapevine, Texas, and you could smoke cigars in the pub and have a Shiner Bock on draft, which is heaven. And there were a group of retirees in there, all from the military, and there were beer steins on the wall for the services. There was the Air Force, the Navy, the Army, and the Marines, and they each had names on them. And there was one old guy in a wheelchair who was drinking from his beer stein, smoking his cigar. And I thought, ain't Texas great? But there was no indication at all that there had ever been a pandemic. There were no masks. There were no plexiglass barriers. There were no stay 6 feet apart stickers. There was nothing anywhere. There were no advisories to wash your hands or cover up or cover your cough. There was nothing. There was no visible trace of any of the COVID era stuff that we've gone through. Here in Georgia, there are still people frequently who will wear masks in the grocery stores. If I go to my local Publix, there are people who wear masks. There are still stickers everywhere about staying 6 feet apart and socially distancing. The only place you got that in Texas was in the airport. That's it. It did not exist outside of the federally run airports. Now, there's this piece, I wanted to talk about it yesterday. It's still relevant today. Andy Kessler in the Wall Street Journal has this piece, Maskless Among the Lemmings. California finally opened up on June 15th. We can actually set foot inside stores and restaurants without having to wear a mask. Freedom. And it's about time. More than 70% of California adults have at least one vaccine jab. The state's 7-day average number of daily coronavirus cases is down 98% from its peak in January. Herds can romp. It's over, except, well, Gavin Newsom will keep his emergency powers. In case he changes his mind about reopening, I made a trip to Trader Joe's to stock up on ultra chocolate ice cream. And yes, I see the irony of buying the least healthy item in a store stocked with expensive organic bruised bananas and dairy-free cashew cheese alternative mozzarella-style shreds. The parking lot was practically a showroom for Teslas and Priuses. Prii, he calls them. I counted 50 shoppers, 49 of them masked. Did these people not get the unmasking memo? I was the only one not wearing a mask, and I was loving it. California is operating on an honor system, and though I'm fully vaxxed, I wish I weren't. That very same day, Mr. Newsom, who is at Disneyland doling out $1.5 million in prizes of taxpayer money to 10 winners of a California vaccine lottery. That beats President Biden's get a shot and have a beer. Lesson learned, next pandemic, I wait to get paid. Maybe those 49 maskers haven't been vaccinated. The adage is, to find the next measles outbreak, find towns with Whole Foods supermarkets. Those places usually have high concentrations of anti-vaxxers. The adage could probably apply to Trader Joe's, too. But this vaccine is different. Statistics suggest red staters are the ones declining the COVID-19 vaccines, not the usual dissidents inspired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'd bet good money all 49 of my fellow shoppers are topped up with vaccine-induced antibodies. So who exactly are they protecting? Me? Thanks, but no thanks. No, I could keep reading. He makes some great points there about this shopping experience. But I'm encountering this in the metro Atlanta area. And I was talking to a friend of mine who lives up in Charlotte, North Carolina the other day, and he was saying the same thing there. Now, I don't have a Whole Foods near me, and I typically don't feel the need to shop at Whole Foods. I am perfectly capable of getting delicious food from my local Publix. But it does seem to be, it is liberals who are vaccinated who can't let go of the masks, who for some reason feels it's almost like Linus and the security blanket from Snoopy, from Peanuts. They can't let go of the mask. Now, I don't blame them, y'all. I've got I got a problem beyond sleep apnea related to blood clots in my lungs a few years ago, and I have to sleep with a CPAP machine. High pressure air at night. I've got a pulmonary pressure issue, and it helps with that issue. But in the mornings, I wake up and I have lines across my face from where the full face mask sits. And it was kind of nice wearing the masks during the pandemic. I could go to grab breakfast in the morning, go to Chick-fil-A or Panera and go inside and no one could see those lines. I'm self-conscious about the lines. But I've given up on the mask now. I've got the vaccine. I'm fully vaccinated. I've been fully vaccinated. My wife and I both. Our kids apparently had the virus. We didn't even know they had it. They're our youngest dealing with some side effects. But we've moved on. My wife right now is on her Harley Davidson motorcycle running errands without a mask. She's got a helmet, no mask. We've moved on. And for some reason, and I don't understand why, and maybe they're shell-shocked over the Trump administration, still to this day, the left is incapable of moving on. They can't give up their masks anywhere in the country. And now there is a problem in the country in that Joe Biden wanted 75% of Americans vaccinated by the 4th of July. He's going to miss the number. Now, this is an interesting note here that no one wants to point out. The Biden administration set a goal for 100 million doses of the vaccine in the first 100 days. Thanks to Donald Trump, he was already ahead of that goal in the first 100 days. Donald Trump's team, they were already doing 2 million doses a day before Joe Biden became president, so it was obvious within 100 days they were going to do at least 100 million doses. But it has slowed down since dramatically. And you know what the media is doing? They've gone back to, well, it's the red staters to blame. They just don't want Joe Biden to get any credit. Not really, though. You've got progressive enclaves of vaccine truthers. I mean, Robert Kennedy Jr., who is anti-vaccine and a vaccine fearmonger, is not of the right. People on the right do not listen to someone with the last name Kennedy unless his first name is D. James. And even then, they got to go to church. People on the right don't listen to Robert Kennedy. It's people on the left. It's progressives. We're skeptical of the vaccine. It's people on the right too, to be fair. There are people on the right too. But regardless, Texas, Georgia, Florida, Arizona, Republican states in the South, they're back to business. As many people as they can. You know, I said when I was in Texas, you wouldn't even know there was a pandemic. The only odd thing in Texas was the lack of workers in the hotel. Younger workers were working longer shifts. In fact, the last day we were there yesterday, I went to a restaurant afterwards, and young guy comes up to take our order, asked him a question about a menu he didn't know, and he says, "I'm very sorry, this is my first day working." And we struck up a conversation, and he's a young guy in high school and decided nobody else was going to work. He was going to go earn some money. So he got a job in this hotel. He wants to do hotel management in college anyway. He's fascinated by the industry. So he decided to get a job in the hotel, working in the restaurant and learn the business. A real hustler there. He's going to do well in life. A lot of people, they don't want to go back to work. And now the Biden administration can't seem to come up with a consistent message to get people to take the vaccine. It seems really easy to me. I'm not even a marketer. I'm not a very good marketer. I'm not a very good self-brander. Like, for example, I went out to this conference, the National Religious Broadcasters Association. There are a lot of independent radio stations out there that aren't nonprofit that may be interested in taking the show. And a whole lot of them knew who I was. A great many. I was actually stunned by the number of people who knew who I was. And I was also equally amazed at how many of them had no idea I did a radio show or that I was now in syndication. Clearly, I've got work to do, and I'm a terrible marketer brander. I don't like to self-promote. I really don't. Believe it or not, I'll talk about myself with you guys on here, but I really don't like. I feel like the work should speak for itself. But clearly, I gotta do a better job. So I'm not a great brander, but it does seem to me to be logical, commonsensical, if you will, that the Biden administration could very much brand this as just get back to normal. If you get the vaccine, take off your mask in airports. And yes, let's trust the American people. There's no reason for the vaccine passport. Pete Buttigieg is out there now, the Biden administration having universally condemned having a vaccine passport is back out floating the idea.
What's your stance on the governor banning vaccine passports?
If a company, the business, wants to take steps to keep their workers and their passengers safe, I would think that from a government perspective, we want to do everything we can to encourage that. And that's certainly our view at the federal level.
So if they want to have a vaccine passports, let them have vaccine passports. Houston Methodist Hospital System has fired or accepted the resignation of 153 workers who refused to get the coronavirus vaccine. The hospital system announced on April 1st that employees would have to get the vaccine in order to retain their jobs, becoming one of the first healthcare providers in the U.S. to mandate employee vaccinations. Houston Methodist suspended 178 workers who did not receive a vaccine by June 7, giving them 2 weeks to get vaccinated or face firing. One of those employees, 25 received vaccinations, while the rest are no longer employed. A group of employees have sued over the vaccine mandate, claiming the hospital couldn't force workers to take an experimental vaccine. However, the suit was rejected by a federal judge. This is not coercion, U.S. District Judge Lynn Hughes wrote in an opinion June 12th. Methodist is trying to do their business of saving lives without giving them the COVID-19 virus. It is a choice made to keep staff, patients, and their families safe. Texas law allows hospitals to mandate the coronavirus vaccine, just as it mandated flu vaccines. Now, it is different, though. The COVID vaccine is technically still experimental. It is not regularly approved. The flu vaccine is. But there's a side difference here I do think is worth pointing out. Think of all of the botched narratives and conversations had by this administration over the rollout of the vaccine. And whether it was good or not, its efficacy, the side effects, the Johnson & Johnson bungling by the FDA. Is it any wonder people are skeptical of these vaccines? The government ultimately has to be truthful, and the government, more and more we're finding, is less and less truthful and more protective and can never admit that it's done something wrong. And as a result, people trust the government less and less. And when you trust the government less and less, when the government tells you the vaccine is safe, you may doubt it. There's nothing wrong with that. Except now we're punishing people for doubting the government that has willfully lied to them and screwed up the messaging, and that I think is wrong.
News and in-depth analysis.
barbecue sauce recipe yesterday. If you want it, you go to ewerickson.com, click on the recipe tab. It is there. It's good eats for the weekend. You can make it your own. Okay, so I've never talked about this. I don't know if Pig Farmer Jr. is listening right now. This one will blow his mind. I really don't talk. I've got friends I've told this to, but I don't talk about this. Never have. It's kind of weird. It's just kind of weird. So I'm kin to Britney Spears. My grandmother and her grandfather. My grandmother's a Spears. When I was little, we used to go over to Kentwood to the Spears family reunion. I mean, she would have been a toddler and I would have been a kid the last time we were in it. I don't know the family. We're related. We're from the same part of Louisiana. And our grandparents are in some way related. I don't even know what it is. We're like maybe second cousins or third cousins. But I've apparently been at a family reunion with her at one point in my life when I was a kid. But man, it's kind of weird because I don't really talk. I mean, I don't want to ride fame or something like that. It's just it's kind of a weird connection to be reading about this and know this woman's my cousin and it's just kind of it's kind of sad to see this story about her. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this, Britney Spears has suffered mental health issues and has been under a conservatorship where her father controls her life, and she's never talked in public about it. And in the past few times she has spoken in court about it, the records have been sealed, and she has demanded more transparency over time. And in demanding transparency over time, there were rumors she didn't really want to out of the conservatorship. And now no one really understands the path forward with this thing, but it's deeply tragic to hear this. She has to keep in an IUD. She's not allowed to have children. She's not allowed to marry. She's been making millions of dollars from various performances in Las Vegas at a residency and only gets $2,000 a week. I have been very... Well, let me put it this way. I've got kids, and I love my kids. I do. I really love my kids. And my daughter is 15 and really is an incredible artist. She's already at 15 sold some works. In fact, she's at a church right now painting a mural on her own, solo, for this church as a community service project for her school. She's going to have so many community service hours, which don't get me started on that. I'm opposed to the idea, but the school does it anyway, and she's got to do it. And she's started out, she's painting mirrors. It really is a fantastic artist. Mixed media, digital media, paints. And I'm very hesitant with my children to let them get early tastes of fame. They have experienced enough with me and things we've been able to do as a family. And it's just, I don't know. It's a very sad thing to see people get exploited, particularly kids. And the more I learn from people who work in Hollywood, the more I know people in Hollywood. I know some really famous celebrities, and they talk about it. Most of them, they weren't famous young. Some of them were. They talk about the industry and how brutalizing it is to kids. You are preyed upon. It appears she probably was preyed upon as a kid. And it clearly was self-destructive for a while, had mental issues for a while. But I mean, I remember the media used to act openly question it. She's still a virgin. What did she and Justin Timberlake do? And I feel really terrible for any human in that condition. And it's just tragic to hear that story. And I've never wanted to talk about it because of all the other ancillary stuff. But I'm kind of thinking maybe it's time to free Britney. Maybe I'm on board. I don't want to be part of the documentary, my goodness. But maybe it's time. It's just it's hard to recognize or realize that there are people in the world like that who are rich and famous and all of that. And there's envy culture and the like, and then you find out about their lives. You're like, that's just dreadful, awful, terrible stuff.
15.
Nothing else. She should probably be in everybody's prayers. My goodness gracious, to live like that. The envy out there of people too who look at this stuff is something. Well, we apparently have an infrastructure deal, allegedly. We are awaiting the developments from the White House, but it appears there is a $500 or $600 billion infrastructure deal that the Democrats and Republicans on a bipartisan basis have agreed to. Now, let's see. Democratic leaders have come up with a strategy to effectively pressure both wings of their party to fall in line behind a bipartisan deal and a reconciliation package, with the hope of sending the bills to Joe Biden's desk as early as summer. Pelosi said today the House will not approve the bipartisan deal until the Senate passes the reconciliation bill. That effectively pressures Joe Manchin and other moderates to fall in line to back reconciliation if they want to see the bipartisan deal become law. Progressives, meanwhile, will be under pressure to back the bipartisan deal because it is expected to contain key authorizations of spending measures and an extension of transportation programs set to expire by September 30th, according to sources familiar with it. A budget resolution has to be approved first before Congress can act on the binding reconciliation bill, which cannot be filibustered in the Senate and can be approved on a straight party line vote. So roughly, the timeline, and this is from Manu Raju at CNN, in July and August, the House and Senate will both vote on a budget resolution. Democrats say they've been told to prepare for the week of August 9th to approve the budget resolution. It could change, but the Senate may vote as early as July. In most of August, Democrats will draft the reconciliation bill. In September, the Senate will vote to approve the reconciliation bill. Then the House will take up the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan deal. So it could be done by October. Now, let me explain what's going on here on all counts. Is the Senate Republicans and Democrats have come together in a bipartisan deal, a gang of 10, with the President of the United States today to say they have some parameters of an outline of a bipartisan agreement where they will together pass an infrastructure bill. Let me play you some of the audio. This is the President of the United States with this gang of senators. Very interestingly, Mitt Romney stands at the back. He's the one who apparently organized everything. And Kamala Harris is hiding behind. It's kind of funny if you see the pictures. Kamala Harris is hiding behind the North Portico column. You can barely even see she's there. She's like creeping her head around to try to see. But here's part of this as they come forward, the president and everybody coming to the microphone, getting themselves organized, going to talk.
And I think it's really important. We've all agreed that none of us got all that we wanted. I clearly didn't get all I wanted. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place. But this reminds me of the days we used to get an awful lot done up in the United States Congress. We actually worked on it. We had bipartisan deals. Bipartisan deals means compromise. One of the things that I've made clear, I've signed on, and I'm going to let them give you the detail because, and you can ask them, and I will talk to you all later, next hour or two, but I promise you I'm not going away. But one of the things that we agreed on infrastructure, we made serious compromises on both ends. There is, and they'll give you the numbers, but they did not, and I understand their position. Republicans and this group did not want to go along with any of my family plan issues, the child care tax credits, the human infrastructure that I talk about. And that we'll see what happens in the reconciliation bill and the budget process. If we get some compromise there, and if we can't, see if I can attract all the Democrats to a position that is there. But they're gonna move in a dual track, and that's all I say. But I want to thank each and every one of them. It's been, a lot of us go back a long way where we're used to doing one thing, give each other our word, and that's the end. Nobody questions it. They have my word. I'll stick with what they proposed, and they've given me their word as well. So where I come from, that's good enough for me.
That's the president speaking outside the Oval Office with this bipartisan gang. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, Bill Cassidy, Rob Portman, Kristen Sinema. I see John Tester there, a few others. And essentially what's going to happen now is the Democrats will compromise with the Republicans on $556 billion. Thereafter, the Democrats will try to pass a reconciliation plan that will do the rest of what Joe Biden wants. Nancy Pelosi is essentially saying she's going to hold it all hostage until the Republicans or the Democrats pass the reconciliation bill. I don't know that they're going to be able to do some of that. The PRO Act is an act they want to throw into reconciliation that would allow workers to join unions and collectively bargain. Patty Murray, the senator from Washington State, says the Democrats believe it's necessary to put it into the reconciliation bill. The parliamentarian of the Senate will probably exclude it because it would change public policy. They're going to do everything they can to throw as much of Biden's agenda into a reconciliation plan. Now, let me explain to you what reconciliation is. It's a rule in the United States Senate that so the Senate and the House pass a budget. And the budget in the Senate can't be filibustered per se. There are ways to slow it down, but you can't really filibuster the budget legislation of the Senate. So reconciliation is when you pass a spending bill, it must be reconciled to the budget resolution. So you can't spend outside the bounds of the budget resolution. What you can do is you can change some of the bottom line elements of spending in Washington through a reconciliation package to keep it in line with the budget resolution. Now, in the past, the Democrats or the Republicans, they've passed a budget resolution and then they get one chance to reconcile federal spending to that budget resolution. The Senate parliamentarian allegedly has told the Democrats if they revise the budget resolution, the underlying budget resolution, they can then revise the reconciliation package a second time. So they get two bites at the apple of passing stuff without a filibuster. In other words, the Republicans and the Democrats can form a reconciliation package, and that reconciliation package will be a series of spending measures that reflect the existing budget. They have to pass changes to the existing federal budget so that they can then pass reconciliation. The budget, I just got texted by a friend of mine who's listening in Washington, the budget can be filibustered. The reconciliation package cannot. So Republicans could slow down the budget process with a filibuster. However, we now have this deal in Washington, and let me weave all of this stuff together to try to synthesize it, make it as easy as possible for everybody to understand what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now. The Democrats are going to alter the federal budget framework. In so doing, Republicans are going to agree to spend $556 billion on bridges, roads, electrical, and airport infrastructure and ports and railroads in this country. Once the Republicans do this, the Democrats will pass a reconciliation measure. The budget can be filibustered. The reconciliation package cannot. It's a rule in the Senate. You can pass a bunch of spending that conforms to a previously passed budget resolution, and nobody can filibuster it. So the budget can be filibustered. The infrastructure package can be filibustered. Reconciliation cannot. But there are some rules with a reconciliation package. You cannot change public policy in a reconciliation package. So, for example, Patty Murray of Washington State wants to pass a law that says every American has the right to join a union and no one can stop them. That's not in the budget resolution. That would be a change of public policy. Therefore, it can't fall into the reconciliation package. Or a better example is the minimum wage. The budget resolutions passed by the Senate do not contain a minimum wage rate. Therefore, Congress can't put a minimum wage increase in a reconciliation package to avoid a filibuster because it would change public policy. What they can do, however, is they can pass a budget resolution subject to a filibuster that includes spending for roads and bridges and senior citizens and child daycare and all of that. And then they can pass a reconciliation package that adds all that stuff, because it won't be a change in policy then. It will have been inside the budget resolution. Alongside them will come the Republicans with this good faith offer of $500 some odd million or $1 billion. Now, there's a problem here. To some degree, the Republicans are conceding some ground. The Republicans are essentially saying, we know you're going to pass all the stuff we don't want you to pass, and we'll give you the veneer of credibility by passing this other stuff. The question then comes down to Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. What do they do? Joe Manchin is out blasting Nancy Pelosi for threatening to take everything hostage. Nancy Pelosi is saying that until the reconciliation package is passed, they won't pass any of the Republican grab bag of stuff. Manchin won't use Nancy Pelosi's name, mind you. I'm trying to find this clip. He just released it. But in all but name, Manchin is saying that Nancy Pelosi wants to be a hostage taker and wants to stop this process from going forward. But you got to remember, I mean, passing stuff in Washington is complicated, and it is complicated by design. It is complicated because the founders wanted things in Washington to be very difficult to get done, because most things should be done at the state level. Gridlock in Washington, D.C. is a feature, not a bug. And so by making this difficult to pass and forcing both sides to have to deal with the budget and forcing both sides to have to deal with an entirely separate House and Congress, it's going to be an interesting way to thread the needle here. And if Joe Manchin doesn't get what he wants, he could very well scuttle the deal. Joe Manchin, by and large at this point, is the president of the United States. Whether Joe Biden wants to acknowledge him as that or not, Manchin right now holds the power in the Senate. And if you hold the power in the Senate, you hold the power for appointments, you hold the power for the budget, you hold the power for gun control, you hold the power for the Voting Rights Act, and Manchin holds all of that by not giving up the filibuster. And by not giving up the filibuster, Manchin makes it possible for Republicans and Democrats who don't want to do some of these things to be able to hide. You know, what's interesting here and what doesn't get the media coverage is all the Democrats in Washington who don't want to do this stuff. And they don't have to even come public because they know Joe Manchin's going to run out and say, hey, it's me. I don't want to do this stuff. And as long as Manchin runs out there and says this, the rest of them, they can hide safely and prepare for their reelection without any of the progressives knowing they're the obstacles behind the scenes.
You can follow Erick around social.
appointments with them. See if they can help you. They want to get you to yes, where banks are saying no. FirstLibertyGA.com. Okay, so just random aside. When I first started in radio, this is now a decade ago, I ran RedState.com for more than a decade and was doing the Red State Conference, Red State Gathering every year, and had done one in Jacksonville, Florida. And went into my job as the host. I had all my Red State writers, and I would have to go to the liquor store and put it on the company dime, basically fund the hospitality suite, and discovered these small batch bourbons, which I was just basically a cheap beer drinker, and discovered one I actually liked and made the mistake. And it really was a mistake. I shouldn't have done it, but I just started talking about it on radio one night. That, as a matter of fact, I discovered there were some bourbons out there I liked. And now I've definitely developed a love of bourbon. And people started sending me bourbon at the studio. And I now have hundreds of bottles of bourbon. I've got more bourbon than my bar can handle. So several years ago, people were asking, we at WSB in Atlanta do a fundraiser every year for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. In fact, I'm going to embrace it. Even though my show is now in syndication, I'm going to embrace and be a part of that nationwide, because Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, it's called Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, but it helps kids around the country. It's a phenomenal organization. A lot of people know St. Jude, but Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, hands down, one of the greatest institutions for children and fighting childhood cancers in this country. They've got a great research center. And so every year I invite people to drink from my bourbon collection. And we do barbecue, pulled pork, mac and cheese, and bourbon. And I have to go, when the show is done in an hour, curate the bottles of bourbon that I'm taking this year to the event. And tonight I will get to drink bourbon with a bunch of people who are helping fight childhood cancer. We will do the Carathon sometime. I forget exactly what it is, but they asked me, do you want to, because now this show is in syndication, how do you want to do it? I was like, I want to do it on this show everywhere. I think everyone, regardless of where you are in the country, should find out about this great organization, because even if your child never winds up there, if your child is battling illness, the research that comes from Children's Healthcare of Atlanta is probably benefiting you and your family, whether you know it or not. So the more exposure I can get to help a great organization like this, the more I want to. And tonight, one of the side benefits is I got to go wind down parts of my bourbon collection. And I've actually, it's kind of funny. So I have all of these bottles of bourbon. And I have found that I've got 4 of them now, 4 brands that I particularly distinctly like, and the others are just collecting dust. Maybe I need to give them away, have an auction off or something. And I get asked all the time whenever this comes up, so I will tell you my go-to bottle of bourbon. On Sunday nights, Philip comes over, and we sit on the front porch, and we have bourbon and cigar night. And typically, I will cook something. In fact, what I cook typically winds up in the recipe email that I send out. I make amazing fried shrimp tacos, y'all. I really do. I don't typically brag about my cooking. The fried shrimp tacos, though, I brag about my cooking. They're fantastic. You would love them. But we have bourbon and cigars, and typically it is Basil Hayden. Now, occasionally, Ryan Pernice is a restaurateur in Roswell, Georgia, Table in Maine, my favorite restaurant, and he recommended the Single Barrel Four Roses. It packs a punch. It's very good. And so those two tend to be the two that I float between. But Basil Hayden, more often than not, Basil Hayden is it, and it's under $50, and it is a great purchase. Really is a good bourbon, Basil Hayden. But there are a couple others that I like. I was fly fishing with a couple of buddies back in March, and one of them brought a bottle of Michener's, which I had not had in years, and realized, this is actually good. It's a sharper flavor profile. Like Basil Hayden is very drinkable bourbon. Michener's it's got a little bit of a punch to it and a sharpness and taste, but it's very good, particularly when you've been in the cold Chattahoochee all day fly fishing. But Four Roses and Basil Hayden tend to be the same. Of course, I've got Pappy. Now, I don't ever take the Pappy so hard to find. I rarely share it, but I do have Pappy, which we will have on the front porch on occasion. But then Jefferson Reserve and Jefferson Ocean. If you find the Jefferson brands of bourbon, they're very good. A very drinkable bourbon. I like Jefferson Reserve until I discovered Basil Hayden. Jefferson Reserve was my go-to. Jefferson's Ocean is kind of a gimmicky marketing thing. They age it by sailing around the world, they claim. It's great. It is good stuff. A little pricier. Basil Hayden is the cheaper of them, and it really is the best. I like it a lot. If you're interested in exploring bourbon, start with Basil Hayden. If you like
30.
Basil Hayden, then you may actually like bourbon. If you don't like Basil Hayden, you probably don't like bourbon. I didn't mean to go there, but there again, when we come back, we got to talk about this bigotry against people who worked for Donald Trump. I had an interesting story yesterday
15.
about this, and I y'all should know what's going on out there with the people who worked for
10.
Donald Trump. It's kind of tragic, actually. Erick Erickson here, the third hour of the program. Delighted to have you joining me. Truly an honor to be with you everywhere. I hope the weather is great where you are. It is nice and hot and muggy where I am here in Middle Georgia. My goodness. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. And you can email me, Erick, at ewerickson.com. You can always find me online at ewerickson on social media or ewerickson.com. I was talking to a friend yesterday who worked in the Trump administration, and this is now the third or fourth conversation I have had in this vein, and I don't know that people know that this sort of stuff happens. And this person said that having left the Trump administration, they are having to essentially rebuild life. That the Trump administration was so contentious. And by the way, this person that I talked to yesterday was never a huge fan of the president. And most of those I have talked to, they liked him to some degree. They were never, I mean, none of them were early Trump supporters. They were not day one Trump supporters. They came in, oftentimes they came in to help the administration, were highly competent individuals. You would be grateful were there. But to a person, and this isn't super common, but it's more common than you might think. They're dealing with leaving the Trump administration and having friends and family who want nothing to do with them because they dare worked for Donald Trump, which is a pretty damning indictment on those people. Friends and family that, oh, you worked for someone I don't like politically, therefore I can't be your friend anymore, or I don't want to sit next to you at Thanksgiving or what have you. It's pretty pervasive that's happening out there. This lack of grace for people who worked for Donald Trump. I always think you've got to extend more grace to others than even people extend to you. You've got to show grace. And as the world gets more secular, part of the issue of the secular religion is a lack of grace. Christianity, C.S. Lewis very famously, maybe it's apocryphal, but it's been said that at Oxford University, C.S. Lewis stumbled into a discussion of different theologians of various religions and was asked, Lewis, what is the singular difference between Christianity and these other religions? Because the consensus around the table of the Buddhist and the Muslim and the Jew and the rest were that really all religions have a very basic similarity, that they're all derived from the same thing. And C.S. Lewis very quickly said, grace. Christianity is the only religion with the concept of grace. Every religion has a concept of mercy. Every religion has a concept of mercy. The idea that you should be spared from that thing you deserve. Mercy is keeping you from that which you deserve, the bad thing you deserve. Grace is giving to you that thing you do not deserve. It's the opposite of mercy. Grace is you get something you don't deserve. Mercy is you're spared from something that you do deserve. You are spared from a punishment you deserve. Grace is you're given a blessing you don't deserve. Christianity has the concept of grace. No other religion has that concept, including the secular religion, completely devoid of grace. And you see that in our politics today. As everybody has become more secular in their religious beliefs, the concept of grace goes away. And we see this with the left's dealings with people who worked for Donald Trump. That there is no grace for anyone who worked for Donald Trump. You must be a social pariah. I can't tell you all the stories I've heard. And I've talked to multiple people who worked for Donald Trump who have similar stories, that people who they consider longtime friends or members of their family, they don't want to have anything to do with these people solely because they worked for Donald Trump. Never mind that in many cases, there are people who prevented Donald Trump from doing things, who guided him in good directions, who helped him shape good public policy. Because they work for Trump, they must be punished. There's a story in the news about someone it's happening to. There is a highly competent public official who is being smeared and deprived of a job he would be highly competent at doing because he worked for Donald Trump. Many of you have probably heard of or know Sonny Perdue. Sonny Perdue was the first Republican governor in Georgia since Reconstruction. Now, let me give you some of his biography. Sonny Perdue was a quarterback in high school in Warner Robins. He was a walk-on the football team at the University of Georgia. He stayed at the University of Georgia and got his doctorate in veterinary medicine. He is a doctor, Dr. Sonny Perdue. The School of Veterinary Medicine. He worked as a veterinarian, became a small businessman, started several businesses, got into the Georgia legislature as a Democrat in, 2002, switched parties. From 1991 to 2002, he was a Democrat in the state legislature after being in Houston County down in Middle Georgia, and rose to be president pro tem of the Georgia Senate. He became a committee chairman. He was the leader. He was assigned to the Reapportionment Committee, the Economic Development Committee, the Finance Committee, the Public Utilities Committee, the Health and Human Services Committee, the Ethics Committee. He switched parties. He got elected governor of Georgia. He single-handedly revitalized the Georgia education system, including the Georgia higher education system. The Georgia higher education system would be on the verge of bankruptcy, but for reforms that Sonny Perdue in Georgia implemented as governor of Georgia. He wrote, and this is from Wikipedia now that I've got. Georgia rose in 2006 in SAT compliance for math and reading scores. Continued to improve throughout his administration. He advanced charter schools. He advanced private schools. He helped to consolidate and merge. Georgia had a ton of small colleges, state-run small colleges, and they couldn't sustain themselves. And Sonny Perdue orchestrated the plan to merge some of those colleges together so that all of them together could survive. They combined resources. He structured this deal as governor. He knew the higher education system in the state of Georgia so well because he had been in such powerful positions in the state legislature overseeing these things. He got it. He becomes governor, leaves office. Donald Trump gets elected, and Donald Trump puts Sonny Perdue in as the Secretary of Agriculture for the United States. And Sonny Perdue stays the whole 4 years as Secretary of Agriculture. He pioneers rural broadband initiatives. He helps farmers around the country, deals with the devastation in the Southeast from the various hurricanes that have come through. A remarkable career as Secretary of Agriculture, was able to not just downsize the Ag Department, but also move a lot of its bureaucrat employees out of Washington, D.C. He was able to get a lot of careerists out of Washington and move them closer to the farmers in the heartland where they actually, it's their job to deal with the farmers. And he said, we should have these people closer to farm country. And he moved them out. A lot of them quit and he was able to save money. But a lot of them did move out. And you've got an agriculture department now that is closer to the farmers that it actually works with. He did a very good job. There's a vacancy in Georgia for the Board of Regents, to be the head of the Board of Regents in Georgia for the university system. Now, the Board of Regents in Georgia has a history of hiring people who are not academics, and that's very important here. They have a history of hiring people who are not academics, who have not been in the higher ed system to oversee the higher ed system in Georgia. They have hired competent business people to oversee it because at the end of the day, the head of the Board of Regents, the chancellor, they're involved in making sure that they meet the bottom line, that kids are getting a good education, the bureaucracy is not too unwieldy, and that the whole system works. Sonny Perdue would like the job. The governor of the state of Georgia would like him to have the job. And a good portion of the Board of Regents would like Sonny Perdue to have the job. And he cannot get the job at this moment, at least. They have hired an interim head of the Board of Regents. Why? For one reason only. For one reason only. They've gussied it up. They fancied it up. They've come up with all sorts of excuses. But the bottom line is there is one reason Sonny Perdue, the former governor of Georgia, who oversaw the consolidation and survival and financial health of academic institutions of higher education in this state for years before working for Donald Trump. The only reason he's being deprived of this is because he worked for Donald Trump. That's it. He's being punished because he worked for the President of the United States and did a remarkably good job at it. And it's not just the professors in the university system who are upset. The academics in charge of the credentialing bodies, who have never had a problem in the past with the state of Georgia hiring non-academics to be in charge of the system, those credentialing bodies are just, well, you can't have a non-academic. I mean, yeah, sure, he's got a doctorate in medicine, but is he really that smart? It's remarkable that we're here in this country, that one can be blackballed for being a competent steward of taxpayer resources just because the President of the United States under whom you served was someone the academics don't like. But the bottom line is there. So he's thus far been deprived of being chancellor. This is remarkable here. A faculty leader, the president of the Georgia Conference of the American Association of University Professors, is one of those people who is upset. The current officer, Steve Wrigley, is set to retire at the end of the month. He told a group of faculty leaders earlier this year the job is complex. The state has 26 institutions of different sizes, levels, and needs, not to mention distinct types of faculty, staff, and students. This is an enormous system budget built on the infrastructure, personnel, and technology realities of these schools. And the chancellor must also help craft the economic, civic, and educational impact of curricula, degree, and brand. The next chancellor has to understand complexities in general and have a firm grounding in higher education-specific complexities. They can only get such an understanding from being part of an academic institution for many years. That's BS, and I know that's BS because Georgia itself has had very competent chancellors who were not inside academic systems. This is a lie by academics who don't want someone who worked in the Trump administration being in charge. But this man, Sonny Perdue, not only presided over the state of Georgia, under which the chancellors of the university served, but he also helped save those institutions financially when he was governor and oversaw the biggest federal bureaucracy outside of the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Defense in Washington, D.C. The Department of Agriculture in Washington on the civilian side has the most unwieldy bureaucracy. It handles farmers and food safety and all sorts of different programs. It's more complex than a university system, and he oversaw it well. They just can't stand having someone who worked for Donald Trump in charge. And it's shameful that the Board of Regents in the state of in Georgia have allowed themselves to be bullied. Because here's the thing we're learning about cancel culture. If you allow them to bully you once, they'll never stop bullying you. If the Board of Regents doesn't stand up to these people, the Board of Regents will be bullied by the tenured academics for eternity. They should have never gone down the road towards an interim chancellor. They should have allowed Sonny Perdue to do it. They should still allow Sonny Perdue to do it. They absolutely should allow him to do it. He's highly competent and qualified to do it. I don't care what the academics say. The academics in this country are hostile to any conservative whatsoever. They do not want a conservative in charge. They don't want a Republican in charge. They can hide behind credentialing. They can hide behind, well, he's got to understand the academic institutions. The man graduated from the medical school, the veterinary medical school at the University of Georgia. He was in the state legislature for years. He oversaw these institutions. It's not just in Georgia, though. This is happening around the country. I highlight this because it's relevant to me. I know him. I know the situation, but it's happening across the country. Liberals are coming up with every sort of excuse to punish anyone who worked for Donald Trump. And if you think it's going to stop there, you're going to start seeing this on the other side as well. It's the liberal belief that they have the cultural clout to be able to do this that gives them license right now to do it. But it will come back on them eventually unless they start showing some grace. But again, Secularism has no concept of grace. There will be hell to pay for all of us because of it.
I really do.